So, boys, breaking news. We'll start off with that. Jim Montgomery fired as head coach of the Boston Bruins. 184 games. You look at the Bruins under Jim Montgomery, and pretty dominant in the regular season. You could probably speak about maybe not enough in the postseason, but and I thought this was pretty crazy that Frank Seravalli threw out that only 41 times under Jim Montgomery did the Bruins lose in regulation. So you're talking about 120, 41, and 23 records. So 0.715 points percentage. Pretty crazy for a guy to get fired at 2.5 years in with that kind of record. But Bruins pretty mediocre start. And I think when you go into kind of the Atlantic Division and talk about that top heaviness, the Bruins being under 500 at this point of the season, still pretty early on.
Don Sweeney and management definitely used Montgomery as a scapegoat here. Their roster was not good from the start. Signing Lindholm and Zadorov this summer, not very good use of cap space. I think everyone can say now. I don't know. It's kind of surprising. You could see it coming in the past couple of days, though. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think Montgomery will probably get hired in the next couple of days here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if he's willing to, like I would say like if he wants to join the staff, like I think if he wants to hold out for the head coaching job, maybe he just like rides out the rest of this contract, gets paid, just chills
Yeah.
out for a bit. Who knows? Obviously, for background, if people are not aware, like Jim Montgomery was head coach of the Dallas Stars. Alcohol and off ice related things took Jim Montgomery away from the Dallas Stars, and the Boston Bruins gave him a chance. He joins the Boston Bruins, a lot of success.
I just saw Grinelli tweet about how Montgomery wasn't the problem, and he's a huge Bruins fan, so obviously he knows like Sweeney is next in line at the end of the season. I've been thinking the last couple of years, has Don Sweeney has not done that much. Like he's gotten away with the Bruins have been one of these teams the last couple of years, kind of like the Buffalo Bills in the NFL, where you can bring in anybody and they're gonna succeed because the culture of the team is so good. And when you see guys leave, they just don't do nearly as well. Like you bring in a guy to fill in for Marchand or sorry, to fill in for Bergeron last year and like Charlie Coyle and your big additions like Pavel Zacha, like these guys, like on any other team, like you look at when Zacha was on New Jersey, he was not very good. Like a lot of people hated Zacha on New Jersey. He was a bit of a bust with how high he was drafted. And then Coyle was like a middle six center at best when he was in Minnesota and stuff. Like, I don't know. He hasn't had made big moves and just he's like they've had success based on the culture. It's one of those teams where you just can bring in anybody, put them in, and the culture is so good that the team does well. Same with like Swayman and Olmark. I like Swayman, like you see him this year, he's struggling, but like it was one of those teams where you could bring in any goalie. Look at Olmark before he went to Boston. He was not that good. And like, yeah, you could say like their scouting department's so good, their analytics department's so good. Like, I just think that it's one of those situations where you could bring in any goalie and they could be superstars just based on the system that Jim Montgomery was playing.
You see a team like this, the Boston Bruins, who we've talked about falling for a long time. What's your perspective on it? I would also add to this effect is like we always see this kind of like turn of these veteran coaches finding different teams. You're seeing it now with Lindy Ruff back in Buffalo. Uh, do you see this as a situation where Boston, obviously Sacco is going to be the interim head coach? Do you think Boston's going to go for another veteran head coach as well? And I mean, I'll say this too, like Bruce Cassidy left Boston happily because he goes to Vegas and wins a Stanley Cup. So maybe just speak on that as well and your perspective in terms of what this could mean for teams trying to break through in the Atlantic Division.
Yeah, I mean, as a Sabres fan, it's huge to see the downfall of the Bruins. There's some turmoil, especially online there. I'm surprised to see him go so early. I mean, clearly Boston has a standard set. I mean, if you look at Buffalo, if they start with 500 like they are, there's really like no, like this is how it is. So when you see that they're like 1 or 2 games under 500, it's pretty crazy that they're letting a coach go, especially if you look at their power play and their penalty kill. I mean, that's what's killing them. They're 32nd in power play and 25th on the penalty kill, and their goalies have played terrible. So I don't know how that falls on Jim Montgomery at all, but I mean, they wanted a shakeup. You look at their 25,000 in cap space available, they can't really do anything player wise. So this is what happens. When it comes to like them hiring a new coach, I don't really think they're gonna hire one. I mean, apparently Sacco, they're really confident in. I don't know if you hear some of the reports, like they were planning on Sacco taking over soon anyways. So but yeah, it's kind of head scratching to me. I mean, they're playing like their penalty kill and their power play is just terrible. So maybe you make a smaller change, like whoever's running the power play. I don't know if that was Sacco or not, but um, they're shooting below expected, they're saving below expected, so they're playing the right way. They're just not getting the results. I agree with Nolan on Zadorov and Lindholm being there. How much money they gave them in the offseason, kind of a terrible use of cap space. So yeah, it's huge for my Sabres and maybe even the Senators or the Wings to maybe climb into that spot.
Yeah, no, I'm with you guys. I think the one argument I'll make that really kind of threw the Bruins in a spin here, and I confidently believe in this, is that the Jeremy Swayman situation. So coming out of the offseason, I thought the Lindholm and Zadorov signings were good in terms of the fact that they filled the two holes that they needed. Like they've been begging for a number one center to step up since Bergeron left, and they needed kind of a more physical guy on that left side, their defense group. Like you've got McAvoy and Carlo on that right side. Hampus Lindholm can be that, but he's more a two-way guy. You wanted maybe more of like that physical, explosive presence. So I think they obviously overpaid for both guys. I don't think there's a secret there. I mean, I said in the offseason, you're probably in an ideal world wanting Lindholm for 2 million less. You're probably wanting Zadorov for 1 million or two less. Uh, on the flip side, what I just said, the Swayman situation, it was like the beginning of the downfall. Like Guy not being there for preseason, Cam Neely's 64 million reasons why, then Don Sweeney not taking ownership. And then you had Jim Montgomery recently not naming Jeremy Swayman, but I don't know if you guys caught it. He was talking about, oh, well, when guys aren't participating in preseason and start off right, then I forget exactly what he said, but I mean, that's a clear jab at Swayman. So you could see that slow like turmoil, and then you also see your starting goalie really struggle coming out of that situation, right? And I had reference. I hate to make everything about Toronto sometimes. Maybe I do like it. I don't know, but you look at William Nylander's situation, who has the same agent as Swayman. I mean, Nolan, you remember, like, guy doesn't sign till December and probably had his worst season and playoffs to date. Like, if you look at William Nylander's career so far, that year when he missed the first couple months of the season, like he just never got it back. Obviously, Swayman didn't miss regular season time, but I feel like as a mental standpoint, when you're in a situation like that to start the season, it's not going to go well for you. Like you have so many distractions in your head. You're like you are dealing with so many different people, and obviously when you have your president calling you out publicly, like that's not a confidence boost at all. So regardless if Swayman wanted to go back into the dressing room because he loves the guys, like he loves the team, all of that, that's kind of hanging over his head. So I'm
still
complete.
you got to prove that you're worth the contract that you fought so hard for and
Exactly.
stood out for. And
So I'm completely with you on the fact that he is being kind of thrown as the guy here, even though it's probably on a higher level. Uh, do you guys have thoughts? And Nolan, I'll throw it back to you. Like, what's the next moves for the Boston Bruins? Like, I think fans are probably gonna. I mean, different perspectives here. Bruins fans, I'm sure, going to talk about it. But is it a trade? Is it a ride out season? Is it just hoping that Sacco's the guy to turn this around? Obviously, we've seen so many times head coach comes in, a new head coach comes in. It's just that spark that's needed.
yeah, no, definitely. I see is everyone online is kind of saying that the Bruins are dead now, which as a Leafs fan, I can say they're not dead. Like Boston's always going to be there. They're always going to be competitive as long as they have Swayman past Marchand, McAvoy. They're not dead. They're not losing any of those guys. I think they just need to make a few minor tweaks and maybe just try to stay afloat, just make the playoffs as wild card, and next year take some as when the cap rises, make some different moves, make some trades maybe. But I definitely don't see them rebuilding this year. Like they're only what game or two under 500.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they're not
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah,
They're
they're not dead at all. You can't count out the Boston Bruins, that's for
yeah.
sure. I mean, but as for their next move, what can they do? They got 29,000 in cap space. There's not really much they can do other than like maybe bring up a prospect. I don't even know if they have anybody big that they could bring up, maybe Lysell, but yeah, I don't there's nothing really they can do, but you can't count them out, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the one move I'm curious about, and again, the Lindholm signing took a lot out of that money that they could maybe spread out on the forward group. But I wonder if so. Like you got three guys that are contributing towards like a decent amount of cap space. Like Charlie Coyle's about 5.5 million and around there. You got Trent Frederick, who's not signed long term, who's been in a lot of trade rumors. So that aspect for the Boston Bruins, like if you're trading those guys, it's not necessarily you're going into the direction of a rebuild. I think you're just kind of retooling that top six. I think the Boston Bruins are quickly learning now that while Elias Lindholm's a really valuable center, he's probably that 2C. Again, Riley, I've been making a lot of Dylan Cousins references lately, but I feel like Dylan Cousins, similar vibe. It's like, I don't think you could ever want Dylan Cousins to be your number one guy, but as the number two, when he's on his game, again, he's struggled this season. I have similar vibes on the Lindholm situation where, you know what, he was on a great line in Calgary with Tkachuk and Gaudreau, but he was with Tkachuk and Gaudreau. I think, again, maybe you consistently put him between Pastrnak and Marchand and they figure it out and they're just a force like that line with Bergeron was. But I think at the same time, he's probably your number two, and Boston hasn't been able to find that one since Bergeron. Matthew Poitras is interesting for me, but beyond that, maybe they move those guys for assets, and then Nolan, to allude to what you said, when the cap rises going into next season, then you go after that big fish for number one.